So I have been waiting to talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League for very, very long. And I wanted to make sure, however, that I had seen it quite a few times and I was quite familiar with this 4-hour film before I talked about it in depth. And now I've seen it twice, and I've seen bits and pieces all over the place multiple times. So really, I would say it's about 3.5, 4 viewings, if that. And what I want to do with today's video is, unlike the usual video essay type stuff, I want this to be a little bit more of a casual conversation. It's not scripted, not really anyway. And the reason behind that is there is so much to cover, not only about the filmmaking or the story or the characters, the usual stuff, but also the ramifications that the existence of this film has, not only for films, but also for the DC universe. And, you know, I really want to talk about how we move forward as DC fans. And so here we are talking about the Snyder Cut. Without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with, of course, the filmmaking. It is so much better. So much better. Like, this is such a great example of the differences that can be made, not only in terms of the filmmaking between Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon, which we'll talk about in just a second, but the differences that can be made in the editing room. Because when you look at certain scenes, the way they're paced, the way they're structured, the way the fight scenes are edited together, the way the conversation scenes are edited together, and I'm talking about the scenes that were in the 2017 Justice League as well, the difference truly is night and day. It's the same shots, slightly different color correction, of course, but the way that these shots move, the way they flow, the relationships between these shots, and I think a lot of it really, most of it in my eyes anyway, is shown through the action sequences. They are truly terrific. And I think that, you know, in the 2017 version, a lot of people were like, oh, well, you know, for a Zack Snyder film, the action is not that good. Well, yes, no shit, because he didn't get to, you know, edit them. And I think editing, especially in action, if you've made action films, you'll know, is such an important part of the process. But not only that, if you look at the simple conversation scenes, and I have always been a believer that you can truly tell how great a filmmaker is, how great a cinematographer is, how great an editor is, not by the big action sequences, but by the small, intimate conversation scenes, just between, you know, two people, or in this case, 6, 5, however many. And the best example that I can give for this is the scene in which they decide to bring Superman back, which in the Snyder version is not only far superior from a script point of view. If you look at the way it's shot, the way it's edited, because, you know, the Whedon version is a completely different scene. You look at the way it's done there, Whedon just shoots everything so generically, so blandly. There is really no dynamism, nothing interesting about the camera moves, about the blocking, about the lighting. And then you look at Snyder's version, and it's this sort of 360 dollying shot where they definitely had to create a special sort of rail or, you know, something kind of equipment to track the actors in such an accurate and precise and specific way, because it goes from outside the circle into the circle, from these over the shoulders into these clean singles, and, you know, it's moving at such a speed that, you know, if it's on Ben Affleck, Ezra Miller's going to have to take a few steps back for the cameraman to kind of find his way into that circle, and then take a step back to, you know, switch places with Ben Affleck when the camera comes round again. And I just think it's absolutely brilliant filmmaking, truly impressive cinematography here by Fabian Wagner, who of course shot some of my favorite episodes of Game of Thrones, including The Battle of the Bastards and Winds of Winter. I just think that in many ways, this is Snyder at his most precise and at his most calculated since maybe Watchmen or 300. Because with Man of Steel, with Batman v Superman, he really opted for a slightly more handheld style, more frenetic. He was able to bring it back to a little bit more lockdown with BVS. But here, with Justice League, it's all locked down. It's all so precise. Every cut, every move, it feels planned. It feels constructed with so much care and precision. And I love that. Absolutely love that. The action sequences, once again, truly breathtaking. Junkie XL's score. Now, of course, there's already been a few memes of it being a little bit repetitive, especially since it's 4 hours long. Whenever Wonder Woman is on screen, you just have someone sort of wailing in the background, and I can understand if it gets a little bit repetitive, but I think it's a really strong score. Perhaps, in my eyes, not quite as on the same level as Junkie XL's work with Hans Zimmer on BVS, but I will say that the Flash theme, I believe it's called At the Speed of Force or something, is truly breathtaking, and I have been listening to it many times independently to the film. So on a technical level, I just think that the Snyder Cut, Zack Snyder's Justice League is just so brilliant in every way. You know, the costumes, the production design, truly magical. And the one last thing I want to talk about in terms of filmmaking, which kind of carries over into the story, is not only the tone, but the mood, the atmosphere that we feel. Because I said in one of my Letterboxd reviews that this film actually feels like a superhero version of Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of backstory, a lot of mythology. The characters really do feel like these deities, these larger-than-life individuals kind of coming together for one quest. And it really does feel like a quest. As for the characters, let's talk about them one by one, because finally, we're at a point where we actually can talk about them one by one. If you watch Justice League, you can't really talk about the characters because the characterization is kind of non-existent. But wow, is the Snyder Cut an improvement here as well. Batman, Ben Affleck, who I've always said is my favorite live-action Batman, despite the fact that The Dark Knight is in like my top 5 favorite films of all time. Ben Affleck is my favorite live-action Batman, and I think he gets to do so much here. And what makes me even happier is the fact that Jeremy Irons also gets a lot of screen time and a lot of chemistry with not only Bruce Wayne, but with Diana Prince as well. And I just love the dynamic between Bruce and Alfred. Of course, I think when it comes to these Justice League films, especially with Zack Snyder's work on Batman, I think his Bruce Wayne has always taken center stage a little bit more than the Batman side, which is absolutely fine. And I think that the Bruce Wayne here is just terrific. Wonder Woman also gets a massive upgrade because now, you know, she feels like a genuine leader, a genuine warrior, this absolute badass that just everyone wants on their team in a fight, you know, to have their back. You know, she truly feels like a god. And I think that was what Zack Snyder has intended, and he has delivered that, and then some. As for Henry Cavill's Superman, obviously, he's not in the film a lot, but once again, this is my favorite Superman. I think to recast or to reboot is just foolish. We'll get onto that in a second, but he's so good, and I just really want to see this team going forward so much. Jason Momoa as Aquaman. Now, I wasn't quite as blown away by Aquaman in this film as I was with some of the other characters, simply because James Wan did such a good job with Jason Momoa and the rest of the cast in the Aquaman film that I'm just like, I love that. You know, I love that, and so when I see him here, it's just like, oh, well, you know, this is Aquaman again. I've already seen like the best version of him in Wan's film. That said, I do love his motivations a lot more. He's not as much of a dickhead. He actually cares. He's, you know, empathetic and compassionate, whilst also having a bit of, you know, saltiness to him, which is great. Always great as well to see Willem Dafoe being added back into the film. As for extra screen time for Amber Heard, yeah. Two of the biggest MVPs of this version of the Justice League, Ezra Miller as Barry Allen and Ray Fisher as Victor Stone. Wow. I mean, Ezra Miller in this film turned from like this stupid, you know, pointless comedic relief in the Justice League to a genuine world-saving, time-traveling, badass motherfucker. He is so awesome in this film. He's actually funny. They recut his scenes in a way that's actually comedic. And that one scene where he turns back time is got to be one of my favorites in any comic book film of recent memory. I truly love it. And Ray Fisher, what a nuanced, brilliant, talented actor who is able to show so much emotion with just half of his face. Brilliant work, and I could not be more impressed. And it's such a shame that, you know, it's unlikely we're going to be seeing him going forward. Once again, get to that in a bit. Now, as for some of the big kind of talking points, the big sequences, of course, arguably one of the biggest ones being the nightmare sequence with Jared Leto's Joker. Oh my God, I love this. All right, now, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really make sense structurally as to why it needs to be in this film, but the scene itself is terrific. Getting to see Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke as well is brilliant because I'm a big Deathstroke fan. Hence why I was so heartbroken upon learning the news of what could have been with Deathstroke and Batgirl and, you know, Ben Affleck's Batman film. But with this nightmare sequence, you know, the main reason really is to have a conversation between Batman and the Joker. And the way it was directed, the way it was shot, the way it was acted, edited, brilliant. Ben Affleck really brought a different side to Batman, I think, that a lot of people have never seen. Jared Leto brought a different side to the Joker that a lot of people have never seen. And I think that a lot of people might go into that scene thinking, oh, this is just going to be a shittier version of the Dark Knight interrogation scene with Bale and Ledger. But it's not. It's a completely different scene that explores the relationship between Batman and Joker in a completely different way. And that's what I absolutely loved about the scene. It wasn't trying to be more of the same. It was a completely unique version and a completely unique take on these two characters while staying true to who they really are from the comics. And I could not appreciate Zack Snyder anymore for doing that. The Martian Manhunter cameo, that's a big one. I'm also a huge Martian Manhunter fan. And to see Harry Lennox voice that character, super exciting. And even the possibility of having Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan, Ryan Reynolds as Hal Jordan. I mean, once again, we'll get to that in a second. But as for any of my issues with the Snyder Cut, I would only really say that, surprisingly enough, this is not Zack Snyder's best looking film in my eyes. For me, that's still 300. Because the color grading, the color correction, makes a lot of the sequences feel a little too similar to one another. You know, Atlantis and Themyscira really should look and feel quite different, and in some ways they do. But the color grading, the color correction, I think it feels almost too Snyder in every scene. It's so gray, it's so dark, it's so desaturated. It's like the opposite of the Marvel problem. Everything in those films, you know, takes place during broad daylight, very low contrast. It's just kind of bland in that way. Here with Zack Snyder, everything's so shadowy and so dark and so moody, and all the fights take place at night or in a dark place. And I just wish that we had a little bit more diversity in terms of the visuals, just so that we really feel that each member of the league, you know, brings something different, not only in terms of their character, but visually to the film as well. That's really my only problem. I don't mind the runtime. There are a lot of people complaining about the runtime. Please, go watch a few David Lean films, a few Akira Kurosawa films. There's stuff that is a lot longer than this. So I really don't mind sitting 4 hours through the film. And it's also surprisingly fast-paced, and it's structured in chapters, so you can break it up into small, you know, watch bits if you wanted to. Now, the main thing that I really wanted to talk about, that I don't usually get to talk about in some of my reviews and video essays, is the actual effect that the film has had on cinema. And I think that's really why I wanted this to be more of a casual conversation, because you can't really script this kind of stuff. I have always been a fan of Zack Snyder. You know, 300, which I saw when I was 7 or 8, which is way too young. Watchmen, which I saw when I was 12, which is also way too young. But I've always loved his filmmaking, and I've always been a big fan. And I was one of the few idiots who absolutely loved BVS when it first came out in 2016. Wasn't the biggest fan of Man of Steel, but I did love BVS. And so I'm all for restoring the Snyderverse. I think that that is DC's best course of action right now, because everyone wants more of this. Everyone wants to see Darkseid. Everyone wants to see Green Lanterns. We all want to see Martian Manhunter. We all want to see this under the direction of this incredible visionary Zack Snyder and his team. We want to see more of Jared Leto's Joker, more of Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke, more of Henry Cavill, more of Ben Affleck, all of these people who are slowly but surely being cut out by DC. And it's just horrible to think that the company is so clearly aware that the fans want this, or maybe they aren't, and yet they're just pumping out this sort of Marvel-esque type stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, I really, really love James Wan's Aquaman. I'm a big fan of David F. Sandberg's Shazam. Patty Jenkins, I kind of defended her with Wonder Woman 1984. I do like these films quite a lot. Even Birds of Prey has nice cinematography, and Ewan McGregor's like really great in it. But they're all like good films. And Zack Snyder's Justice League, in my eyes, is a brilliant one. And not only is it a brilliant film, it's a brilliant setup for this grand epic story that even Marvel has never done, in my eyes. And I remember seeing someone post online that the two most successful DC properties in the last 5-ish years are the ones that have nothing to do with the MCU, are not similar to the MCU in tone, in structure, in anything. It's Zack Snyder's Justice League and it's Joker, Todd Phillips, Joaquin Phoenix. And it's so clear that DC will succeed not by copying Marvel, but by doing DC, but by doing something different, something unique. Hence why I'm excited for Matt Reeves' Batman. And I really just wish that the people at Warner Brothers, at DC, whoever, kind of come to their senses and get their heads out their asses and just realize that what we want is the Snyder Cut. What most of us want is more of the Snyderverse, and we want to see this story that has already been set up so beautifully be restored, be revived, and revitalized, and shown, however, in whatever way Zack Snyder and the team would like to. And so I'll just leave you with one thing. I'll leave you with this. Think about, I've already compared it to Lord of the Rings, right? If Justice League, this film, is meant to be the Fellowship of the Ring, and we get 2 more films in a trilogy, just think about all the incredible stuff that could come in the next 2 films. Just think about Helm's Deep. Think about Pelennor Fields in Lord of the Rings. Think about For Frodo, My Friends You Bow to No One. All right? Imagine being able to see the DC equivalent of something like that. Not saying it's going to be as good as Lord of the Rings, but just imagine how epic things could be if certain people came to the realization that this is what the fans want.